Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel. In this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first let's talk about the conflict on the territory Ukraine, where during the previous night the Russians carried out a massive attack using hundreds of drones and dozens of missiles. And this video was published this morning, and as you can see that during the night the capital of Ukraine, the city of Odesa, the Odesa region and other eastern regions came under a massive attack involving attack drones and ballistic missiles. Approximately 300 attacked units, air means of various types were used, a significant portion of which were jet-powered drones equipped with cameras. Reconnaissance was conducted in the Cherkasy, Kyiv, Kirovograd, Kharkov, Poltava and Sumy regions. So when talking about this map, everything as usually. The orange lines means that the Russians were using ballistic missiles, yellow lines means that the Russians were using drones of different types, pink lines means that the Russians were using Banderol missiles, and as you can see the Russians were conducting a lot of reconnaissance operations. When talking about reconnaissance operations, these are the yellow lines, and we can see that the Russian drones were creating a lot of circles around above the territory Ukraine, which means that they were staying over some certain position and were making videos or publishing, or maybe they were making photos, trying to understand and to discover positions of the armed forces of Ukraine. The most important thing is that the task that the Russians, when they were attacking the territory Ukraine, they weren't tasked to destroy warehouses, to destroy military facilities, or to destroy ammo depots. The most important thing that the Russians were tasked for the overnight attack was to force the Ukrainians to use PAC-3 interceptors for Patriot systems. And you know that for the first time for a very long period of days, the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine reported about Iskander missiles that were intercepted by the Ukrainian side. This morning, the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine stated that the Ukrainians managed to intercept 7 ballistic missiles of the Iskander type. But several independent sources and military experts reported that the Russians didn't attack the territory Ukraine during the previous night with Iskander missiles. The Russians decided to save them for further massive attacks, but during the night the Russians were attacking the territory Ukraine with improved S-400 missiles. So basically the thing is that the Russians know, because Zelensky stated about this several days ago, that the Ukrainians received a batch of PAC-3 interceptors, and we see that the Russians using these S-400 missiles forced the Ukrainians to use these, and basically not even to use but to waste these PAC-3 interceptors while bringing down and intercepting the S-400 missiles, which means that the Russians managed to finish the task. This is the most important thing, and the Ukrainians, as we can see during the night, waste all their PAC-3 interceptors, which means that most likely during the next night between the 27th and the 28th of August of 2026 we will see a real attack carried out by Russians, and during the next massive attack the Russians will use or would use dozens of ballistic missiles, and only during the next night we will see the real damage that the Russians are planning to deal to the economy and to logistics of the armed forces of Ukraine and of Ukraine itself. Anyway, during the previous nights, despite the fact that the Russians were mainly tasked to force the Ukrainians to use Patriot interceptors, managed to hit some facilities on the territory of the city of Kyiv and Kyiv's agglomeration. For example, during this morning we received lots of videos once again from the Boryspil region. So this is the southeastern parts of the Kyiv's agglomeration, and according to information we have, the Russians attacked this warehouse, this facility, and as a result of attack, this warehouse was destroyed. Russian drones struck the Boryspil district of the Kyiv region. Large fires have been reported at the warehouse facilities. So this is the video that was published by pro-Ukrainian sources. This is another video from the same area, Boryspil and Fastiv districts, Kyiv Oblast, where houses are on fire. In this video we can see the same facility, the same warehouse that was wiped out by Russians during the overnight attack. And summarizing summarizing everything, we can say that since the beginning of the logistics war, as for the eastern parts of the Kyiv agglomeration, the Russians have already destroyed up to 10 warehouses and facilities in this area. At least 3 of them are located in the Boryspil region. During the previous days, the Russians destroyed this facility. Today, we received the report that the Russians destroyed this warehouse. Several days ago, the Russians destroyed a warehouse to the north of the city of Boryspil. And before the Russians shift their focus to the city of Boryspil, up to 4 or 5 warehouses or facilities were destroyed through the city of Brovary, which is located to the east of the city of Kyiv. So we see that now the Russians are tasked to destroy everything that the armored forces of Ukraine could use for their purposes through the eastern parts of the Kyiv agglomeration. Most likely when Russians finish with this part of the agglomeration, they will shift their focus further. Furthermore, the Russians attacked the city of Kyiv itself, and today we received the report that a stadium in the central part of the settlement was badly damaged by Russians. And this video was published this morning by pro-Ukrainian sources. Here we can see a fire broke out right after the Russians attacked this facility with a drone. The sources reported that these days the Russians use a lot of drones of Gerasimov 5 type. Russia is increasingly using jet-powered Gerasimov 5 drones in its strikes, with their deployment more frequently being captured on video. According to Ukrainian data, the number of jet-propelled used in July rose roughly 5-fold compared to with June. Russia is also restructuring production to emphasize jet-powered Gerasimov 4 and Gerasimov 5 models. The city of Kyiv wasn't the only city that was attacked by Russians. According to information we have, lots of explosions were recorded through the Odesa region. And when talking about this map, we see that the Russians once again were attacking probably checkpoints, border crossing checkpoints between Moldova, Romania and Odesa. Most likely the Ukrainians continue using logistics in this area with the purpose to avoid roads that goes from the most southwestern parts of the Odesa region through the city of Odesa in the direction of mainland. The Ukrainians continue using roads between Odesa and the western parts of Ukraine that go, let's say, along the state of Moldova and Romania. So that is why the Russians continued attacking these territories, trying to stop the logistics through this area. Furthermore, according to this map, explosions were recorded through the Kremenchuk oil refinery. We have this video published by pro-Ukrainian sources, and here we can see how exactly the Russians using ballistic missiles were attacking the Kremenchuk oil refinery. But as of the morning of the 27th of August of 2026, we still haven't received fire anomalies from the area of the Kremenchuk oil refinery or any video that can confirm that the Russians managed to deal damage. Most likely the Russians attacked oil refinery, but most likely the Russians attacked an empty tanks in this area and haven't dealt significant damage to Ukraine. Just another object infrastructure was badly damaged. Lots of explosions were recorded through the city of Zaporizhzhia. The Russians were attacking the settlement using ballistic missiles. And as for the city of Zaporizhzhia, we have another very important update. Yesterday in the evening, the President of Ukraine, Zelensky, published this video. According to this video, Zelensky was located on the entrance to the city of Zaporizhzhia, but several independent experts managed to find out that this video was AI generated. So this is the situation, and this is how Zelensky shows how he visited this or that settlement along the line of combat contact. Another important thing is that during the previous evening, the Ukrainians also attacked the territory under control of the armored forces of the Russian Federation, and we are talking about the city of Donetsk. The sources reported that the Ukrainians attacked the central part of the settlement, and lots of videos were published from this area. And according to these videos, the Ukrainians used up to 10 or up to 12 cruise missiles of the Storm Shadow type, and as a result of attack, these buildings and facilities in this area were badly damaged. Lots of videos were published by locals, and here we have lots of explosions. Here we have videos with attack itself. In this video we can see up to 6 missiles that hit these buildings in the central part of the city of Donetsk. The pro-Russian sources reported that about casualties, and the locals authorities called people for help and support of those who suffered from this attack. So the situation is very difficult, and this morning the Minister of Defense, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation stated that due to the fact that this attack was carried out with the use of the Storm Shadow missile of the United Kingdom production, the Russians have the right to attack, to strike back, and to destroy or to attack facilities that belong to the United Kingdom, either on the territory of Ukraine or somewhere else. So this is probably exactly what the CIA director Radcliffe was talking about with the Russians when he was talking them not to attack any NATO country. I would like to remind you that CIA director used his rare trip to Moscow this week to warn Russian officials against escalating tensions with NATO allies, particularly Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. So maybe he was talking about some facilities that belong to the United Kingdom that are located on the territory of the Baltic states. But once again, today the Russians stated that they have the right to strike back and to attack any facility anywhere in the world that belong to the United Kingdom. So let's wait and see how the things are going to develop, but obviously the situation is quite difficult. Furthermore, we received a report that Poland is deploying tanks to the Russian border near the Kaliningrad region, the country's Minister of Defense announced. So maybe this is just a signal that if Russians start making anything in the area of the Baltic states, the NATO countries will deploy their forces immediately. So this is the situation. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation with Ukraine's massive attack during the night. We have this picture where we can see the approximate routes of attacks. The Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation this morning reported that Russians intercepted and destroyed 267 drones of the armored forces of Ukraine. And the most important thing, that this morning we haven't received anything that can confirm whether the Ukrainians managed to deal damage or not, which means that most likely this attack was repelled by the Russians without consequences for the Russian infrastructure. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground. These days we start receiving more and more updates that the Russians have finished preparation of the Chernihiv offensive operation. The sources reported that Russians concentrated a lot of troops in this area. Furthermore, I would like to remind you that during the previous days we received lots of reports that North Korea deployed up to 50,000 soldiers somewhere in the territory of Russia with engineering forces, with missile forces and so on. So who knows, maybe these forces were deployed in the area of the Bryansk region or along the border with the Chernihiv region, and maybe the Russians are planning to use the North Korean forces, something like support, something like situation to not to allow the Ukrainians to counterattack or to carry out an unexpected and fast lightning attack. Meanwhile, the Russians would use their forces to attack the Chernihiv region, of course not with the purpose to advance as deep as possible in the direction of the city of Kyiv, but just to create another buffer zone, but this time along the northern border. And of course, if the Russians are able to create a buffer zone between the Bryansk and Chernihiv regions, something like this, the Russians would be able to shorten the distances to the city of Kyiv itself, and from these positions the Russians would be able to improve their attacks in the direction of the capital Ukraine. The Russians would be able to bring closer their Iskander, let's say, launching positions. The Russians would be able to get very close, let's say, to the capital Ukraine, which will obviously reduce the time required for Russians to attack the territory of Ukraine from this area. So the situation is quite interesting, and let's wait and see how the things are going to develop. Because if Russians improve their launching sites for 100 kilometers from the Bryansk region deep inside of the northern part of the territory of Ukraine, the Ukrainians will have even less time to detect and to intercept ballistic missiles launched by Russians. Now let's move further and let's talk about the situation on the ground. During the previous 12 hours, additional and small changes were recorded through the Orechov direction. These are the changes on the ground between the dates. The Russians maintained the line along the river of Konska. Now let's move further and let's talk about the Dobropolye direction. During the previous 12 hours, pro-Ukrainian sources reported about increased activities of sabotage and reconnaissance groups of the armored forces of the Russian Federation in the area of the settlements of Belozerska to the north of the road TO-514. Pro-Ukrainian sources reported about big danger for FPV drone operators in this area, so they proposed units of the armored forces of Ukraine to stay safe and to care about themselves, which means that the Russian sabotage and reconnaissance groups, which means most likely managed to improve their position significantly to the north of the city of Dobropolye, and several pro-Russian sources published these changes where we can see how exactly the sabotage and reconnaissance groups of the armored forces of the Russian Federation have improved their position since the end of the 26th of August of 2026. The Russians continue advancing, trying to take under complete control the pocket between the cities of Dobropolye and Drushkovka. As for the Slavyansk-Drushkovka direction, during the previous 24 hours, we received lots of very important changes and updates. The most important is that the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of the Russian Federation, Gerasimov, came to the area of responsibilities of the Group of Forces South, and he was reported that the Group of Forces South continue advancing. The area of responsibilities of the Group of Forces South is located between the rivers of Seversky Donetsk and the city of Konstantinovka. And so the Group of Forces South fights for the northern Konstantinovka and the eastern Drushkovka, the eastern Kramatorsk and Slavyansk. And according to the report, currently street fightings are taking place on the territory of the villages of Kurtovka and Verolyubovka. So the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of the Russian Federation is trying to tell us that maybe in coming days the Russians would establish complete control over the villages of Verolyubovka, Kurtovka, Izhevka and so on. This will allow the Russians to maintain the lines and to get as close as possible to the city of Drushkovka itself. Furthermore, the commander-in-chief was reported that the distances between the edge positions of Russians and the city of Slavyansk itself is already less than 4 kilometers. This visit is a very important one, and this video visit shows that in coming days the Group of Forces South will increase their activities along the entire front line. As for the northern directions, during the previous 12 hours, we haven't received anything special. And that's it for today. The Military Summary channel reminds us we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching, subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye-bye.